The dust swirled around Emma's worn boots as she stood outside the trading post in Redemption Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1878. Her fingers trembled as she clutched the last remnant of her former life, a silver locket containing a faded photograph of her mother. 3 days without food had left her lightheaded, and the bruises on her wrists, hidden beneath tattered sleeves, were finally starting to fade from purple to yellow. She'd fled her uncle's ranch in the dead of night after he'd arranged her marriage to a cattle baron twice her age, a man with a reputation for burying wives. "I'll trade this for bread," she whispered to the shopkeeper, her voice cracking. "It's real silver." Before the shopkeeper could respond, a shadow fell across the wooden counter. Emma looked up into the weathered face of a man who seemed carved from the very mountains that loomed behind the town. He stood well over 6 feet, with sun-bronzed skin that spoke of endless days under the Wyoming sky. His dark hair curled slightly at his collar, and his eyes, the color of pine forests after rain, held something she hadn't seen in a man's gaze for longer than she could remember: respect. "Keep your locket, ma'am," he said, his voice low and steady as a river stone. His calloused hand pushed a $20 gold piece across the counter. "Get her whatever she needs, Tom. Food, supplies, a proper coat." He turned those green eyes back to her. "Don't pity me, cowboy," Emma said quickly, lifting her chin despite the shame burning through her chest. She wouldn't be anyone's charity case, wouldn't trade one form of dependence for another. The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but something warmer than amusement. "I see strength, not shame," he whispered, quiet enough that only she could hear. "Name's Jackson Hayes. I run the Triple H Ranch about 10 miles north. I could use help with cooking and mending if you're looking for honest work. Room and board, fair wages, no strings." I want to pause here for just a moment to ask you something important. If you're enjoying this story, would you consider taking a few seconds to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and leave a like? It truly means the world to us and helps us continue bringing you quality stories like this one. Your support keeps these tales alive. Now let's continue with Emma and Jackson's journey. Emma studied him carefully, searching for the trap, the hidden price. But Jackson Hayes simply waited, patient as the mountains themselves, his stance open and unthreatening. Behind him, she could see a wagon loaded with lumber and supplies, a working man's transport. "I can cook," she said finally, "and I mend better than most, but I won't be anyone's. I won't. You'll be an employee," Jackson interrupted gently. "I've got 2 ranch hands, Miguel and his son Carlos. We keep proper hours, proper boundaries. You'll have the small cabin near the main house. Door has a lock, and you'll have the only key." Something in Emma's chest loosened, just slightly. "Why would you help me?" Jackson's expression darkened for just a moment, a shadow of old pain crossing his features. "Because someone should have helped my sister when she needed it. She wasn't as lucky as you're about to be." He cleared his throat, pushing the memory away. "Tom, fill an order for Miss Emma Pierce." She hesitated, then added, "And thank you, Mr. Hayes. I'll work hard. I promise you won't regret this." "I don't expect I will." Jackson tipped his hat. "I'll wait outside while you gather what you need. Take your time." The ride to the Triple H Ranch took them through some of the most beautiful country Emma had ever seen. The September afternoon painted the prairie in shades of gold and amber, with the Wind River Mountains rising like ancient sentinels in the distance. Stands of cottonwood trees clustered along creek beds, their leaves just beginning to turn yellow. The air smelled of sage and pine and something else, Freedom, Emma thought. The scent of possibility. Jackson didn't press her with questions during the journey, for which she was grateful. Instead, he pointed out landmarks. That's Devil's Tooth Rock. Good place to shelter if you're caught in a storm. And see that grove of aspens? That's the northern boundary of my land. 3,000 acres, give or take. It's beautiful, Emma said softly. And it was. Wild and untamed and honest in a way her uncle's manicured estate had never been. It's home, Jackson replied simply. Has been for 8 years now. Built it up from nothing after I mustered out of the cavalry. The ranch itself appeared as they crested a gentle rise. A sturdy 2-story house built of local timber and stone, weathered but well-maintained. A large barn stood to the east, and Emma could see several horses in the corral. Chickens scratched in a fenced yard, and a vegetable garden showed signs of recent harvest. The small cabin Jackson had mentioned sat about 50 yards from the main house, nestled among a stand of pines. "Miguel," Jackson called as they pulled up. A man in his 40s emerged from the barn, followed by a young man who couldn't have been more than 16. Both had warm brown skin and kind eyes. "This is Emma Pierce. She'll be helping with the cooking and household tasks. Emma, this is Miguel Reyes and his son Carlos." Miguel swept off his hat. "Welcome, señorita. It will be good to have proper cooking again." Jackson burns water. His eyes twinkled with good-natured humor. Despite her exhaustion and fear, Emma found herself smiling. "I promise to do better than that." "The bar is very low," Carlos added solemnly, though his own lips twitched with amusement. Jackson shook his head, but Emma could see he wasn't offended. "Let's get you settled. Miguel, could you show Miss Pierce to the cabin while I unload the wagon?" The cabin was small but clean, with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a table with 2 chairs, and a trunk for storage. A lantern sat on the table, and Emma noticed someone had stocked the firewood box. The door had a sturdy bolt on the inside. "The boss, he is a good man," Miguel said quietly. "He does not speak of it much, but his sister, she was hurt by a bad man many years ago. Jackson found her too late. She died from her injuries. He carries that with him always. So when he sees someone in need, especially a woman alone," he shrugged. "He cannot walk past. But he is honorable, señorita. You have nothing to fear here." Emma's throat tightened. "Thank you for telling me. Carlos will bring you water for washing. Dinner is at 6. Tomorrow you can begin your work, but tonight you rest." Miguel tipped his hat and left her alone. Emma sank onto the bed, her body finally releasing the tension she'd carried for weeks. For the first time since she'd overheard her uncle planning her future like she was livestock to be traded, she felt something that might have been hope. That first evening, Emma joined the men for dinner in the main house. Jackson's kitchen was functional but sparse, clearly the domain of men who cooked because they had to, not because they enjoyed it. She'd freshened up as best she could, though her dress was still the same worn calico she'd been wearing for days. The meal was simple: beans, bacon, and bread that Miguel confessed he'd bought in town because Jackson's last attempt at baking had been like eating clay. "I can bake," Emma offered. "My mother taught me. She made the best sourdough in 3 counties. Jackson's eyes warmed. "Then you're already worth twice what I'm paying you." They ate with easy conversation, Miguel and Carlos discussing the fence that needed mending in the south pasture, Jackson mentioning that he'd seen signs of a mountain lion near the high meadow. Emma mostly listened, absorbing this new world. It was different from her uncle's ranch, where meals had been silent, tense affairs dominated by his booming voice and casual cruelty. After dinner, Emma insisted on washing the dishes despite Miguel's protests. As she worked, Jackson came to stand beside her, drying the plates she handed him. "You'll want to know the rules," he said quietly. "We rise at dawn. Miguel and Carlos handle the livestock and heavy ranch work. You'll manage the house, cooking, mending, garden work when the season's right. Sundays are yours to do as you please. Wages are $30 a month, paid on the first. Miguel keeps a rifle by the front door, and there's a pistol in the kitchen drawer. Do you know how to shoot?" Emma shook her head. My uncle didn't believe women should handle weapons. "Then I'll teach you," Jackson said firmly. "Out here, everyone needs to know how to protect themselves. Wolves, mountain lions, sometimes worse. Would you be comfortable with that?" Something in Emma's chest expanded. He was offering her power, not taking it away. "Yes, I'd like to learn." "Good," Jackson set down the dried plate. "Emma, you don't have to tell me what you're running from. But if anyone comes looking for you, anyone who might mean you harm, I need you to tell me immediately. Understood?" Emma's hands stilled in the dishwater. "He might," she admitted quietly. "My uncle, the man he wanted me to marry, paid him a lot of money. He won't want to return it." Jackson's jaw tightened. "Then he'll have to deal with me. And Miguel's not half bad with a rifle either. You're under my protection now, Emma. That means something out here." "Why?" Emma asked, turning to face him. "Why are you doing this for a stranger?" Jackson was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes distant. "My sister's name was Sarah. She was 17 when our parents died. I was 22, just joined the cavalry. I thought she'd be safe with our aunt in Kansas City. But our aunt's husband..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "By the time I got the letter and made it back, Sarah had been dead for 3 weeks. She'd tried to run, but she had nowhere to go, no one to help her. She died cold and alone and afraid." His eyes refocused on Emma. "I can't bring Sarah back, but I can make damn sure no woman ends up that way if I have the power to prevent it." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm sorry about your sister. So am I." Jackson cleared his throat. But she'd be glad to know her story made a difference, that it saved someone else. He managed a small smile. "Get some rest, Emma. Tomorrow, we start teaching you how to survive out here." The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that slowly healed something broken inside Emma. She woke before dawn to start the fire in the kitchen stove, made coffee strong enough to strip paint according to Jackson's specifications, and prepared breakfast for the men. The work was hard but honest, and for the first time in her life, she felt the satisfaction of being truly useful rather than merely ornamental. Jackson kept his promise about teaching her to shoot. Every evening after dinner, he'd set up targets behind the barn and patiently guide her through loading, aiming, and firing his Colt revolver. "Breathe out slowly," he instructed, standing behind her, his hands hovering near hers without quite touching. "Let the shot surprise you. Don't anticipate the recoil." Emma squeezed the trigger, and the bottle on the fence post exploded into glittering fragments. She lowered the gun, grinning. "I hit it!" "You did!" Jackson's smile was genuine, reaching his eyes. "Sarah would have liked you. She always said women should be as capable of defending themselves as men." They'd grown more comfortable with each other, Emma noticed. Small touches became more common. His hand on her shoulder when he passed, her fingers brushing his when she handed him his coffee, Nothing inappropriate, but laden with a tension that made her breath catch. One afternoon in late October, Emma was kneading bread dough when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. Through the window, she saw a rider she didn't recognize, a heavy-set man with cold eyes, wearing expensive clothes that marked him as wealthy. Her blood turned to ice. Harold Benson, the man her uncle had sold her to. She was still frozen at the window when Jackson emerged from the barn, Miguel at his side. Emma couldn't hear the words, but she could see Benson gesturing angrily, jabbing his finger toward the house. Jackson's stance was deceptively relaxed, but Emma had learned to read the tension in his shoulders, the slight shift of his weight that meant he was ready to move quickly. The conversation grew heated. Benson reached for something, a document, Emma realized, probably the marriage contract her uncle had signed. Jackson took it, read it, and then, to Emma's shock, tore it in half. Benson's face turned purple with rage. His hand moved toward his hip, toward a pistol, and Emma didn't think. She grabbed the rifle from beside the kitchen door and fired a shot into the air. All three men froze, turning toward the house. Emma stepped onto the porch, the rifle steady in her hands despite her hammering heart. "I believe Mr. Hayes asked you to leave," she called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'm not property to be bought or claimed. I'm a free woman, making my own choices, and I choose to be here." Benson's eyes narrowed. "Your uncle signed a legal contract, girl. That makes you mine." "My uncle had no legal right to sell me into marriage," Emma replied. "I'm of age, and I never consented. That contract isn't worth the paper it's printed on, as Mr. Hayes just demonstrated." Jackson moved then, stepping between Benson and the house. "You heard the lady. Time for you to ride out, Benson. And if you're smart, you won't come back." "This isn't over," Benson snarled. But Emma saw the calculation in his eyes, the realization that he was outgunned and outmatched. He wheeled his horse and galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Emma's hands started shaking as the adrenaline drained away. She carefully lowered the rifle, only to find Jackson striding toward the porch, his expression unreadable. "That," he said as he reached her, "was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen." "I wasn't going to let him shoot you," Emma said, her voice wavering now. "I wasn't going to lose." She stopped herself, but not quickly enough. Jackson's eyes softened. "Emma," he reached up slowly, telegraphing his movement, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You could have been hurt. So could you." Emma found herself swaying toward him, drawn by something stronger than fear or logic. "Jackson, Miguel's pointed cough interrupted them. "Perhaps the señorita should come inside. That man, he may return with others." Jackson stepped back, though his eyes never left Emma's face. "Miguel's right. Come on, we need to talk about what happens next." Inside, around the kitchen table, they discussed options. Miguel thought they should report Benson to the territorial marshal. Carlos suggested moving Emma to his cousin's ranch in Montana. But Jackson shook his head. "Running won't solve this," he said. "Benson's the kind of man who sees resistance as a challenge. He'll keep coming, unless—" He paused, looking at Emma with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Unless you're legally protected. If you were married to someone else, he'd have no claim." The air in the room seemed to thicken. Miguel and Carlos exchanged glances and quietly excused themselves. "Are you suggesting a marriage of convenience?" Emma asked carefully. Jackson leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "I'm suggesting I've grown accustomed to having you here, Emma. These past weeks, The house feels like a home now, not just a place I sleep. Your laugh at Carlos's jokes, the way you hum while you bake, the sight of you practicing your shooting with that fierce concentration. I've come to depend on these things. On you. Emma's heart was racing. Jackson, I know I'm not young or particularly handsome, Jackson continued, a hint of uncertainty creeping into his voice. I'm just a rancher with a hard past and a harder temperament sometimes. But I'd be a good husband to you, Emma. I'd be faithful and respectful, and I'd spend every day trying to be worthy of you. Not handsome, Emma stood, moving around the table to where he sat. You think that's what I see when I look at you? She reached out tentatively, touching the scar that ran along his jawline. I see strength, kindness, a man who showed me respect when I'd forgotten what that felt like. A man who gave me back my dignity and taught me how to protect myself instead of making me dependent. Jackson caught her hand, pressing her palm against his cheek. Then say yes, Emma, not because you have to, but because you want to. Because what I feel for you is real, and I hope, you might feel something similar. I do, Emma whispered. God help me, Jackson. I've been falling for you since the day you told me you saw strength instead of shame. Since the first time you smiled at my terrible coffee and pretended it was good. Since you trusted me with that rifle and treated me like an equal instead of a burden. Jackson stood, towering over her, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that seemed impossible from such large, work-roughened hands. Then marry me, for real, not just paper. Be my wife, my partner. Help me build something lasting here. Yes, Emma breathed. Yes, Jackson, I'll marry you. He kissed her then, soft and reverent, like she was something precious that might break. Emma melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt, anchoring herself to this good, solid man who'd saved her in every way that mattered. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. We'll do this properly. I'll speak to the circuit preacher when he comes through next week. In the meantime, you'll stay in the cabin, everything proper. I won't have anyone question your honor. Ever the gentleman, Emma teased, though her heart swelled with love for him. Always, Jackson promised, especially with you. But fate had other plans for their careful propriety. 3 days later, a vicious autumn storm rolled down from the mountains, bringing early snow and winds that howled like wolves. Emma had been checking the chicken coop when the temperature plummeted, the sky turning a sickly green-gray that made her stomach clench with primal fear. Emma! Jackson's shout barely carried over the wind. She turned to see him running toward her. Tornado! Get to the cellar! They ran together toward the main house, fighting against wind that tried to rip them apart. Lightning cracked overhead, so close Emma could smell the ozone. The world had turned into a maelstrom of flying debris and darkness. Jackson yanked open the cellar door, practically throwing Emma down the stairs ahead of him. They tumbled into the darkness, just as the world above exploded into chaos. Jackson pulled the door shut, throwing the bolt, and then they were alone in the darkness, the storm raging overhead like an angry god. Emma couldn't see anything, but she could hear Jackson's harsh breathing beside her, could feel his solid presence in the dark. Are you hurt? He asked, his hands already moving over her arms, checking for injuries. I'm fine. You? Fine. His hands stilled on her shoulders. Emma, I need to tell you something. If something happens to me, don't. Emma's hands found his face in the darkness. Don't you dare give me some noble goodbye speech, Jackson Hayes. We're both going to survive this, and we're going to get married, and we're going to have a long, boring life together. Do you understand me? She felt his smile more than saw it. Yes, ma'am, but just in case, I love you, Emma Pierce. I need you to know that. Emma's breath caught. I love you too. So much it frightens me sometimes. Nothing frightening about love, Jackson murmured, pulling her closer. It's the only thing that makes sense in this whole damn world. They held each other as the storm raged, minutes stretching into hours. At some point, Emma dozed against Jackson's chest, lulled by the steady beat of his heart. When she woke, the silence was almost deafening. Jackson carefully opened the cellar door. Daylight streamed in, revealing devastation. The barn was gone, torn apart and scattered across the prairie. The chicken coop had vanished entirely. Emma's cabin was a pile of splintered wood. But miraculously, the main house still stood, battered but intact. Miguel! Carlos! Jackson called out. Here, Jefe. Miguel emerged from behind the ruined barn, supporting Carlos, who was limping but conscious. We made it to the storm shelter near the south pasture. The horses? Scattered but alive, I think. I saw them running ahead of the storm. Jackson surveyed the damage. We've got work to do. Emma, the cabin, is gone, Emma finished calmly, which means I'll need to stay in the main house. I suppose that solves one problem. Jackson looked at her, and despite everything, the destruction, the danger, the uncertain future, he started to laugh. Emma joined him, and soon they were both gasping with the kind of laughter that comes after fear, the body's way of celebrating survival. The next week was a blur of rebuilding. They salvaged what they could, ordered lumber from town, and worked from dawn until well past dark. Emma moved into one of the upstairs bedrooms, though she and Jackson shared meals and work and long evenings planning their future. The circuit preacher arrived on a clear November morning, bringing news that Harold Benson had been arrested in Cheyenne for attempting to kidnap another young woman. Apparently, Emma hadn't been his first attempt at forcing a marriage, and this time there were witnesses and a territorial marshal who took a dim view of such activities. You're free, Jackson told Emma that evening as they stood on the newly rebuilt porch. Truly free. You don't have to marry me now. You could go anywhere, do anything. Emma took his hand, lacing their fingers together. I could, but why would I want to be anywhere but here, with you? Jackson pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. Just wanted to make sure you knew you had a choice. I choose you, Emma said firmly. I choose this life, this place, this future. I choose us, Jackson. Every time, I'll choose us. Then let's get married, Jackson said, grinning, before another tornado comes through or wolves attack, or some other disaster tries to keep us apart. They married 3 days later in the main room of the ranch house, with Miguel and Carlos as witnesses, the circuit preacher officiating, and a handful of neighboring ranchers in attendance. Emma wore a simple blue dress that Miguel's sister had sent from town, and Jackson wore his best shirt and a wildflower tucked into his vest pocket, a late-blooming aster that Emma had found growing near the creek. Do you, Jackson Hayes, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? The preacher asked. Jackson's eyes never left Emma's face. I do, for now and always. And do you, Emma Pierce, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Emma smiled, feeling tears of joy prick her eyes. I do, together, she added, remembering that first day, when he'd offered her not pity, but respect. Together, Jackson echoed, understanding perfectly. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Jackson cupped Emma's face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that promised forever, tasting of fresh starts and hard-won hope. The small gathering erupted in cheers and applause. That night, as they sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge, Emma leaned against Jackson's solid warmth and felt something she'd never expected to experience: complete peace. "What are you thinking?" Jackson asked, his arm around her shoulders. "That I ran away from a nightmare and stumbled into a dream," Emma said softly. "That the worst day of my life led me to the best thing that ever happened to me." Jackson pressed a kiss to her temple. "Same here, Mrs. Hayes. Same here." The winter was hard, as Wyoming winters always were, but the spring brought new life to the Triple H Ranch. Emma's garden flourished, filling the root cellar with vegetables. The cattle thrived, and Jackson bought more land to expand the ranch. Miguel's wife and daughters joined them from Mexico, bringing laughter and life to the property. Emma learned to ride like she'd been born in the saddle, and her shooting became good enough that she won a turkey shoot in town, much to Jackson's proud amusement. She started a small library in the main room, ordering books from catalogs, and on winter evenings, she'd read aloud to Jackson, Carlos, and Miguel, sharing stories of places they'd never been and adventures they'd never have. But their own adventure was enough. Building a life together in the wild Wyoming territory, facing each challenge as partners, loving each other through the hard seasons and celebrating the good ones. That was the story Emma wanted to live. 5 years after that desperate afternoon, when she'd stood in a trading post ready to sell her last precious possession, Emma stood in the same spot, this time with a basket of eggs from her own chickens and a list of supplies to purchase. The shopkeeper, Tom, grinned when he saw her. "Mrs. Hayes, good to see you. How's that husband of yours?" "Ornery as ever," Emma said with a laugh, "and I wouldn't change a thing about him." As she walked back to the wagon where Jackson waited, she thought about the girl she'd been. Desperate, afraid, convinced her life was over. She thought about the man who'd seen past her desperation to the strength underneath, who'd given her the tools to save herself instead of just saving her. Jackson helped her into the wagon, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. "Ready to go home?" Emma looked at him, this good, steady man who'd become her partner, her love, her home. "Always," she said. "As long as I'm with you, I'm already there." They rode back to the Triple H Ranch together, the afternoon sun painting the prairie gold. Two people who'd found each other in the midst of chaos and built something lasting from the ruins of their pasts. It wasn't a fairy tale. Life in the Wyoming territory was too hard for that. But it was real, and it was theirs, and that made it perfect. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Emma and Jackson's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.